So Tay and I are going to have a nice Q&A with each other today about our practice and how we work together and the many different phases it's gone through and the works that are in the show and the content there. So I might get started and shoot Tay a question. So Tay, Parallel Park has done both live performance and performance through video. Can you speak to the conceptual difference between these two types of performance mediums?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so in our earlier works, we were writing scripts, we were doing a lot of storyboards, and we were really performing for video. So with that, you of course have the power to edit all the awkward bits out. But I think that we also found that it was incredibly liberating to have full control over how we were presented on screen, which was something that was really important to us in the beginning. And then we were bold enough to kind of venture into live performance. And I think that it was terrifying, yes. But it was very rewarding. You, of course, don't have the ability to edit. And you have your audience right in front of you. And yeah, it was very confronting, but also really heartwarming. And I felt that it made us more connected to the work. There's one particular performance that makes me so nervous to think about, but also warms my heart. It's at Out of Space, the old Outer Space Gallery in Brisbane, and it was a work called In Time. And we had decided that it would be a great idea to have an artwork in the car park and an artwork in the gallery. And when the show started, everyone would come into the car park and enjoy the work over there. And then halfway through the show, we would open up the space and do our performance. But we had to wait in the gallery for half of the opening and be really nervous. But then once we started doing our performance, it just felt really wonderful. It just felt great. And it was a very balmy, humid night in Brisbane, and the small gallery was packed full of the whole Brisbane art community. It was really beautiful, but because it was such a dynamic movement piece, we were really the audience was almost dancing with us, and I found that really rewarding. Yeah, definitely.
There's a solidarity there.
Yeah, definitely. We're all sweating.
So true.
Amazing. Okay, now it's my turn. There is always a push and pull between us when developing our video work. You always write the narrative, and I always attempt to break it down and abstract it. Do you think that's a key part of how we collaborate?
Yes, I do. So yes, so I think it's such a key dynamic that we have that push and pull. So when we make video work, the way that we just think in two very different ways. And in terms of video, I think in a very structural way, and I see scenes as they happen, the bigger picture, what story I want to convey. And then Tay has a really good knack for going in between those scenes that I've laid out and pulling out the core elements and kind of the concentrated concepts that they have, and we pull those out and just use those. And it's always a thing of me adding more and then Tay subtracting and finding really what is the strongest in the work. So it is a constant battle, but it's a constant negotiation, not battle. But it really works for our video works, I think. Yeah, that bigger picture and then abstracting it in a way that we can convey more meaning. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. My turn for you, Tay. So those who don't know, Tay has trained in dance since they were 4 years old. and they've always kind of held the reins in regards to the choreography that we've had in Parallel Park. So Tay, in different performances, there is choreographed repetition. Can you speak to the conceptual use of repetition and how it translates in different performance contexts?
Yeah. All right. So one of the first works was actually the work that I was talking about earlier about In Time, which was this really slow, like more abstract, almost like a durational dance piece. And we were thinking a lot about closeness and durational performance and tension and endurance and even like slowness as a form of passive resistance. And there was this one movement within the work that was like an A-frame. And it was done by standing apart and then leaning our body weight slowly against each other so that we could stand as one, leaning against each other's body weight.
You can kind of see it in the banner for this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And in this pose, in Time, it was this really like tender moment where we could feel each other's heartbeats as our chests pressed against each other. And in the performance, they were beating very fast. But it was this kind of like strength, this kind of togetherness that kind of held the movement together. And so we repeated this same movement or this same pose in Outgrowth, which is the video work within this show. And this A-frame, it almost became like a nod to Felix Gonzalez Torres, like the Untitled Perfect Lovers with the two clocks side by side. But in this work, it had completely changed. It was the same movement, we were doing the same things, we lent into it in the same way, but it was completely different. In the earlier work, the concentration was more on like the heartbeats for us as performers, but when it came to Outgrowth, it was more about like being soaking wet, like dripping like droplets off our fingers and feeling, you know, really our surroundings rather than like focusing on each other. And I think that it's really interesting that these poses and moments almost work like dog ears, like a bookmark, to kind of mark moments of our practice or moments of our relationship to look back on and to reflect and how they change. There's another moment and another movement that's shown in Outgrowth, which is almost like a slow clock-like movement, and our bodies are quite close, and in Outgrowth our hands move together very closely, and there's a certain type of tension. But when that movement is repeated in Shift, which is actually the video on the other side of Outgrowth in this show, the movement is again repeated, this clock-like movement, but it's further apart. The hands don't actually touch, and so there's a different type of tension, but I feel like across all these movements there's still like a feeling of togetherness, of duality, and of like support and care that I really enjoy. Yeah, that I think is really important, but it is definitely like markers across our practice, and I think that's how we've kind of employed repetition and movement in that way.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. Okay, so when we're brainstorming, mind mapping, and building the foundations of a work, I immediately think of movement and space, and you always think about sound and tone. In relation to our focus on queerness, how do you think these elements have changed over the past 5 years, and more specifically within the works in the show?
Lovely. Yes, our works have gone through quite a big change, I think, in the past 5 years. I think I often use sound as a starting point to think visually. So if you look at our earlier works, for example, sexual athletics, deuce, pussy presence, even in the titles. They were very kitsch, they were very over the top, they were very loud, they were very colorful. And Tay and I we started Parallel Park maybe 6 months into us dating. And so this phase of work really reflects the honeymoon phase of our love life, I think, which is quite funny. You know, there was lots of PDA. We weren't afraid to show suggestive content at all. Some of it was quite explicit, and we were just kind of baby queers, and we wanted to scream it to the rooftops. So I think that really came across in sound and tone, in that it was just we were very excited and very over the top. And that has dramatically shifted throughout our practice. And you can see it definitely if you look at the works, outgrowth and shift that are in Friendship as a Way of Life. And I think like kind of when we came out of that honeymoon phase, and you come out of that phase when you're in a relationship where you're kind of like in the bubble and you just exist within this bubble, and you kind of come out of a bit and you see where you exist in the world as a couple maybe. And the work kind of definitely took a turn more to looking at the more tender moments and the subtleties through like visual framing and tone. And like when you think of sound in the earlier works, the sound was very poppy. We chose you know, popular songs. It was lots of quick movement, like tennis commentary. It was very fast paced and fun. And in the latest works, the sound kind of we draw from sounds that are existing in the environment that we film in, natural sounds from the environment, or kind of big sounds that draw out the subtleties. For example, in our groundwork, we use a Brisbane artist, Jordan's song from his latest album. And it's a very stringy, slow, over-dramatic number, which could be compared to kind of the dramatic nature of the earlier songs and sound in the earlier works. But because it's so long and drawn out, it really brings out the subtleties in the work. And so I think there's this big shift from very in-your-face, to the point, to more ambiguous and subtle and tender. Yeah, I think that has a lot. And like, so Shift is our first work that we've made not as a couple, and it marks like a big transition in our relationship of making together, which is, you know, it's really beautiful to show it in this show, Friendship as a Way of Life, and start Parallel Park's new journey together. And that really shows, I mean, queerness and community, and, you know, these relationships that outlast romantic phases. Yeah. Hope I didn't ramble too much there. There's a lot to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you got it, yeah, definitely right on the head. There's been an absolute shift. Definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about intimacy and how we show it in Parallel Park, Tay, how important do you think the role of intimacy is in the performance practice of Parallel Park?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I definitely think it's like a key part of all of our works across video and performance and stills. And I definitely agree with what you were saying before, and it almost applies to this as well, that the intimacy throughout our works has definitely shifted. Because at first, like you were saying, it was quite like explicit, overt, very obvious, like sensual intimacy, which we thought was like really important to have in our work at the time, because we weren't seeing it anywhere. We weren't seeing that reflected back at us, so we were kind of making the work we wanted to see in the world, I guess. But then we started kind of this shift from a romantic relationship into a platonic relationship, and then we still kind of had this intimacy, but it's more platonic, and it's it's full of like support and care and love and like promoting a lot of like closeness and togetherness and skill sharing. And I think that that's really important. And I think that that's one of my favorite elements of Parallel Park's work and something I really hope we continue to foster.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different types of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question, yes, is actually from our research into collaborative practice and heavily references co-art, artists in creative collaboration, which is written by Ellen Mara de Watcher. And this question is, what was the first work we made together, and did you think it would be a one-off collaboration or something that was ongoing?
Yes, that book is our Bible. Yes, I do remember the first work that we made together. Tay and I, like I said, had been dating for 6 months or so, and we were in 3rd year of uni, and we had stayed back and everyone else had gone home, and we were studying and kind of working within these individual frameworks of our individual practices in terms of research and making. And because we would just talk all the time about art, we kept coming up with all these ideas of things that we wanted to make and wanted to explore, but we couldn't because they didn't really fit our individual frameworks of the institution of studying. So yeah, we'd stay back one night. We had gone by to the nearby like little shopping center around the corner, and we'd gone to the dollar store and bought these high-vis vests and caps. And we went back to school, and I think I had brought in a vibrator to do a still life or something, but I had it with me. And so we stripped down and we put on this high-vis gear and hats, and we went into an empty studio, and there was a plinth there, and I had my camera, and we just started filming ourselves doing things together. So at first we started rolling this vibrator when it was turned on, like across the plinth, and it made just like this construction noise, like truly resounding on this plinth. And then we took it in turns, kind of holding it against the wall and pressing it down. And when we pressed it down, it just like made this kind of resounding echo throughout the building. And it was kind of like we were declaring ourselves and our relationship and our beautiful young honeymoon phase to the whole university. And it was very loud and fun. And I think something, yeah, we just like something really special happened that day. We just had so much fun playing, and we filmed it and made these works, which are now buried.
They will never see the light of day.
The baby works. And yeah, it was just that sense of play, I think, that we found making together under this name of Parallel Park that we didn't have in our individual practices. And it was just so energetic, bouncing off each other, because we do think very differently, and we do make very differently. Tay's quite minimal and I'm often not. And it, like I said, that subtracting and adding is such a fun push and pull collaboration. So I think, to answer your question of did I think it would be the last work ever made, I think no. I don't think we had like a 10-year plan of, you know, making together, because when you're dating and making, it's a bit tumultuous, like nothing's certain. But I think we knew that we just worked well together and that we had so much fun, and that was something worth following through no matter how our relationship changed. So yeah.
Yeah, it definitely just like felt good. We felt good, and we just like didn't think about it too much. And we're just like, let's keep doing this.
That's right, we can break all the rules, you know,
Yeah.
partner crime.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, lovely.
Well, to go off that book, because I also love that book, and talking about collaborating, can you, Tay, put your finger on anything you get from collaborating that you don't get from working solo?
Yeah, absolutely. I love collaborating. I definitely place it like on the same level as my own like individual practice. Like they're almost like different modes of making. Like I feel like they complement each other. But when you collaborate with someone, there's obviously an opportunity to bounce ideas off one another and to strengthen those ideas. And there's, more opportunities for skill sharing and seeing things from a different perspective. And I feel like our work is always a way for us both to get on the same page.
Yeah.
And I think that it's almost like a mode of communication with each other.
It's a safe place to argue.
Yeah, safe place for healthy conversation. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Fabulous.
I have one last question for you.
Get me.
Do you think that it was always going to be the art that survived? And did the end of the relationship put the art at risk, or was it just the relationship that was ending? This question is actually in the book, and it's in conversation with Ellen Green and Dragset, which is another collaborative duo in this show. And I think they've been a big inspiration for us and kind of this shift in our practice. But yeah, what do you think, Hull?
Yes, that's a very good question. Yeah, like it's hard to say when relationships end what is going to happen. And I think we always felt like Parallel Park was our child. But it was a different sector of our relationship that we worked through and communicated in. So I think it's funny, after we broke up, I think it became a way, like a kind of a space for us to relearn how to be with each other and relearn how to reconnect and have our relationship with each other without that romantic lens anymore. And it was, like you said, a way for us to communicate with each other, because we love to express through Parallel Park. It is that safe experimental space. So yeah, I think Parallel Park has enabled us to live on, and even, and then it's just an endless cycle. Yeah, what do you think, Tay?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that going back to like that other question of like when we first started to collaborate, we were like, yeah, it just feels good. So why would you stop a good thing? And I feel like we both come back to it as a really fun, playful, like place to play and like to have fun and enjoy ourselves and make art that we really care about and like use it as a platform for communication with each other and to kind of digest what's going on in the world and how we fit into it. Yeah, definitely. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for listening. That wraps up our conversation and question time.
Little Q&A.
Thank you so much to both of you. I just had a check in our live event Q&A, and we don't have any questions. But I just thought I would ask you one final question just before we wrap up. Knowing that you're in different cities now, and how has this affected your collaboration and the work of Parallel Park?
Yeah, it's affected it a lot because I think we're used to being in each other's spaces all the time and being on each other's doorsteps. We have started a letter. No, it's not collaboration, but we are pen paling and we are making works through the mail together at the moment. Which it's a funny time anyway because we can't really be around each other anyway because it's the pandemic. So it's kind of, practice for our practice at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And it is hard not being able to just drive over to your house and be like, all right, let's work on this project. But I think it's definitely, it shows the strength of Parallel Park and more time for creative problem solving. And I'm really enjoying the letter making works. It's really nice having a pen pal. We've sent so far some short stories and some photographs, and we've actually been filming ourselves receiving the letter and opening it up, which I think the content of the letters are obviously very important, but I think the reaction in those videos, there's something to it. There's something exciting there, which is really nice.
Yeah, and I think like we still collaborate on everything in life anyway. I mean, I'm currently studying and I will call Tay up to bounce ideas off all the time. And then I think parallel park stuff gets born out of that as well. As long as we're still talking to each other and having those day-to-day conversations, there's always something new to make. But we definitely have to explore new ways of making now that we don't have in the same city. But video has always been one of our favorite mediums to work with. So we've talked about filming remotely from our different parts of the world and combining them together. It's a new way to experiment with making, I think, if anything.
Yeah, definitely. I'm eager to embrace this new chapter of Parallel Park. Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. We do have a last minute question that's just come through. So, right, could you tell us a little bit more about your new video, Shift?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to go whole or?
You're on the screen, you go.
All right, I'll go. Yeah, so Shift is really exciting for us. I feel like it's funny because in all of our previous works, our bodies have been very present. Like we have been almost the subject matter of all these video works. And within Shift, it is a performative video. There is a choreographed move that we repeat throughout the whole work, which is that clockwork that I was talking about before. But the whole work actually films our shadow. And so we are present, but we're kind of hidden away. And I think that Parallel Park definitely plays with a lot of like public and private and kind of sharing like a lot of ourselves in our work. And I think that this is kind of an interesting step away from that, although we're still very present in the work. The work was actually filmed on a scaffolding platform in the middle of a vacant block of land that was erected so that you could see the view of Brisbane City from where a possible deck or veranda on a Queenslander possibly would be. So it was kind of like thinking about like a future that I'm not sure if we ever imagined for ourselves. It's, you know, a very head view of what, you know, the journey of a relationship goes or whatever, but we definitely felt that it was like an interesting space to spend time in, to think about like, yeah, the shift of our relationship going from romantic to platonic and what that means and what we've lost and maybe what we've gained. Yeah. What do you think, Hull?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that you've said. And like you said, touch and our presence is very present in all of our video works, but there's a noticeable separation between our bodies in this work, in that you're looking at the shadow and you can see that we're not touching as we move around the screen together. And it's like kind of fading in and out and like real and unreal visually. And orally, it's got an environmental sound of wind in it as well, which is, I don't think we've done anything like that before. I don't think we've used an environmental sound before. It's always been very, yeah. So that was interesting. And it's our first work that we've made together as a platonic relationship. So it's a big experimentation, I think, for us as well, in how we're constantly negotiating how we interact with each other and how we deal with the world and all the things. So yeah.
It's also the first video work that we made that we weren't in the same city. So I actually edited the work first and then I sent it to you and you edited, and we had different ideas of how it would look. And so it was this different type of push and pull
Yeah, that's
where
right.
yeah, which I think is really interesting in like the new context, and that we live in different cities, in different states, and how that works in relation to like, yeah, even just making a video work, and yeah, seeing how that goes. But yeah, I think the title shift really speaks to the shift in the relationship, and how, like I was talking about before, even though that we're a little bit further apart with the movements in this work, there's still a lot of like togetherness, care, and support, like that, I hope comes through in the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just had one other question come through, which it's pretty easy answer, I think. But they just asked, what is the name of the book you mentioned earlier? I think it might have been you, Tay.
Yeah, do you have any?
Something I prepared earlier. It's a really beautiful book. I absolutely recommend it. It's called Artists on Creative Collaboration. It's written by Ellen Mardwacha, and it's a beautiful book. It talks about lots of different collaborations all over the world, and it's similar to the talk we did tonight. It's in an interview format, but through all these collaborations, there's like groups, there's duos, there's like romantic relationships, and there's also like friendships and family as well. So I would absolutely recommend it.
Yeah, great read.
Definitely.
So it looks like that is it for the questions. Thank you so much. Are there any final comments or questions for each other? Also happy to leave it there if you are.
I guess we just say thank you for having us. Yeah, it was lovely.
Thank you for having us. And we've never really done this format before. I feel like Tay and I really learned a lot from having this experience of asking each other questions, because we have a lot of assumptions about each other from just, you know, being with each other for so long. And so I think I feel like I've learned some things about Parallel Park in the process of it in this conversation. So thank you for facilitating it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.